Okay, Mike. I'm sitting in a very nice flat here in London, which you tell me you've won. Is the life of a 20-something professional punter all champagne and parties, as people would imagine? Or is it... I know you've already told me that you work hard, but do you play hard as well?
Yeah, I do, but it's at the same time it's not champagne and parties. Certainly not during the week or anything like that. Every day's in the office. People don't quite understand that. How long the hours are when you're working that long in the week, and it doesn't stop on a Saturday morning when busiest day, everyone else having their day off, and I've suddenly got to navigate a whole host of bets and where to get them on, where's the best place, and you're heading out on a Saturday night. I've still got to have a bet in the 8:45 or the 9:15 at Wolverhampton. It's not quite as easy as picking up your phone at 8:42 and whacking it on sometimes. The same with the Sunday. There are downsides to it, but the upside, it's pretty good. Certainly work hard and as a result, if you can, it's a hard industry to do well in, but you get well rewarded at the same time. I'm very lucky that in the job that I do, that if I want to go racing on a certain day, typically I can't. The downside is that there is so much work in the summer that I do find it hard to go racing and then catch up instantly. But this year for sure. Last year was different. I did jumps as well, but this year I'm just doing flat racing only. So this winter I'm not really going to do much. So if I want to, I went to Kempton on Monday. Next week I'll probably go up to Tats for the sales, and the winter's very relaxed, which is nice. So I do have quite a few quiet months in the winter. Try and go away a fair bit, and it's quite relaxed really, but the workload's 20% of what it is in the summer, and I don't work to 20% of the level, but I probably work to about 40-50% of the level.
Now you mentioned Wolverhampton, so you're not adverse to having to go on the all-weather?
No, I love all-weather racing. The problem is the liquidity from my point of view. If you're punting up to a few hundred, you're okay, but I don't necessarily. It's not necessarily a bad thing. The quality of racing is typically worse, but it's not necessarily easy to have a bet on these meetings. I do think nowadays in horse racing, and unless you're really managing to bury your money, there's only room for one person to bet a horse on the all-weather. When I have my bets, the market typically doesn't move. It really couldn't. I just can't understand why people want the market to move when they're having a bet. To be fair, I think it's a bit of an ego thing. For me, if I'm backing a horse at 8-1, I don't want to see it 4-1 in an hour's time, whereas a lot of people do. When I was 19, I probably did, but that was just... Nowadays, it couldn't be worse. For my own angle, for one, I don't want people to try and link it to me, even if they probably wouldn't know it was me anyway. They can tell somebody's, spotted something. A lot of my bets drift, which I like a lot. It really works. If you're backing horses that shorten, your accounts will get shut. If you back horses that drift, all the bookmakers will look at you and think you're an idiot. So it really doesn't work for me for them to shorten, and if they drift, that's better. So, but I don't think with the all-weather racing nowadays, I don't think the liquidity's there anymore. If a bet's like a bad bet for my account, say it's double figures. There's only the liquidity in the market for one person to get that price, because if I'm going to have a bet at double figures, I'm typically going to move the market, and the price that I'm taking, it won't be there for somebody else anymore, and that works both ways. I can't get on early in the morning. If somebody else sees the horse that I like, they're going to take my price. So that happens a lot with overnight markets. Now I know that looking at today's racing, there was a horse I liked, they got to put in at 20-1 last night. I woke up this morning, I don't even really bother looking at the overnight markets, but sometimes it's nice to see what's moved just in case you've missed something. But, that's 9-1, 8 o'clock this morning, and it was still getting back then. It works both ways, but I think the liquidity in that side of the racing is quite poor. But, I started out betting on the all-weather. I think it's the best surface to learn how to bet on. It's typically the fairest racing. The surface doesn't change. It's the same for them all. Give or take some draw biases here or there, the quality is getting better and better at the moment. I mean, the all-weather championships are fantastic for the sport. They're fantastic for racing. This Wolverhampton, there's some very good racing on Saturday night there. I just think, it's very good for the sport. I think it's the best place to learn where to have a bet is on the all-weather.
So you've dispelled the myth that if something drifts, it's not fancied. Do you not get the collie wobbles if you've had a nice few? What would be a typical bet for you? How much?
Average would probably be 4 figures. It would really depend, to be honest. It varies a fair bit. If they drift, you do still think, you sometimes second chance. It depends what you're really betting on. There's certain trainers that, I wouldn't really like to see them drift. I'd rather see them strong. But at the same time, you've got to play that into your not the book. I don't really price up races. If I'm going through a bad run, I'll price up a race because it reassures me that I'm still doing it right. But typically, that's not really how I go about picking the horses I want to have a bet on. That all gets factored in. There's some horses you look at the betting. It's in at 10-1. If it goes off 5-2, you probably still want to back it at 5-2. If it goes off 14s, you probably don't want to touch it. But that's, you build that up with experience. You get to know owners. You get to know, not get to know them. You get to know their style of running horses, how they gamble. If you know somebody owns it that's a big punter, they don't have to be a shrewd punter. They just have to be a punter. If they want to have a bet on the horse, it's going to get backed. If it drifts, he probably hasn't backed it, and it's probably not fancied. But you can play that into everything. Most owners are terrible gamblers. They think their horse is, the next Seabiscuit, and normally they haven't. Their owners are terrible judges, and trainers are typically not very good either. They know their own horse very well, but the chances are that of the 9 horses they're running against, they've probably only seen 2 of them run last time out. That's because they don't sit in an office all morning and watch racing, and they don't sit in an office all afternoon and watch racing. So, that inside infos can be used both ways, really.
So what you're saying is the science doesn't lie. So if your figures throw up as a good thing, then you probably know more than the connections, unless, of course, there's skullduggery afoot.
Yeah, I typically know more. The worst thing that if I'm racing and someone tells me that, their horse is fancied, I'll probably be wondering, why did it run crap last time? What was that? I'm much more interested in that. I'm much better at working out, the chance of a horse of running than the owner typically. I'd be much more interested in why it ran badly last time. I'd be asking those questions rather than rushing off to the bookies. Typically, if a horse ran well last time and they're telling you it's fancied, there's nothing to see there really. It is what it is. I already know everything. The interesting ones would be if somebody was fancied it at the racecourse and it had run badly last time. That's where the price can be totally wrong. But, these never really happen. I'm just sort of speculating on that subject. But, owners are terrible judges at, the way it goes anyway.
Now you talk about winning, and obviously you're very good at what you do, and you've got a lot of self-confidence in what you do. But I'm guessing you're no different than anybody else, and you have a bad patch every now and again. Does the self-doubt ever creep in?
Self-doubt doesn't creep in anymore. I tend to have one losing month out of 12 in a year. That just seems to be how it goes. I don't really know why. Typically, I always find my if I work hard, very hard, for however long, and I know I'm working hard, that I tend to get rewarded about 3 months down the line. If I decide to have a lazy patch for, whenever, like if I don't work hard in March or April, for example, then it'll probably catch me out midsummer. That's probably what I think. That's in terms of gambling. There's a very, it's very easy to put your feet up when you're winning and think everything's easy. But typically you're winning because you put in some hard work 2 months earlier. And if you put your feet up during the winning period, that's the worst thing you can do, because 2 months down the line, it will catch up with you. And then you'll be working, you'll be losing on the basis of work you didn't do 2 months ago, and you couldn't work any harder at what you're currently doing then, but you won't be able to turn it around during the losing patch. It will just fizzle out at some point.
Now, is what you've come up with, is it a rating system? Is it a formula? Is it an algorithm? or is it just something that you've got that you do you have to crunch the numbers through a computer system or something?
It's sort of all of the above, really. I don't crunch the numbers through a system. I work very similar to I'm basically a private handicapper. I handicap every single flat horse in training on every single run it's ever had, and I'll use those ratings that I compile basically to make my bets. It's not an algorithm or anything like that, and the prices that I don't have anything to churn up a price for me. I think there's far too many variables in racing. There might be some people that can do it, but if they're using an algorithm to churn out a price and saying they're winning more than 7 or 8%, I just would never ever believe that. Typically, I think the figures that I churn out will be that I'll tend to be trying to back the horse that's my highest rated, or you're looking through there and trying to find the horse that's dropped a few pounds down the weights from 4 starts ago, and I'm still using, just going through the race myself and using the numbers that I've compiled basically on the back of, visuals, form, everything from, sectional timing, stride length, if I wanted to look at that, combining that with, knowledge of owners, trainers and their breeding maybe. But still, I said I didn't price up a race. There's a lot of people that do it, and it probably is the correct way to do things. But I find you're much better getting a feel for the race. There's a fallacy around it's called the long shot favourite bias, and basically punters are much more likely to give a chance to a horse that's an outsider. It's very easy to find something to make a case for a horse that's an outsider, but typically, and this happens a lot in horse racing, if you look at all the stats it's quite clear to see, but long shots are always over bet in racing. It's not the other way around with favourites.
Okay, but surely there must be price centric to have a bet or not. If you fancy somebody you thought it was going to be 9 to 1 and it's opened up 6 to 4, you wouldn't back it, would you?
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. I only ever I don't get dragged into backing 12 to 1 shots that I think should be 10s or 9s. Only because, and there'll be a lot of people that bet on football now that can't understand that. And I've done a lot of work with a football syndicate who can't understand it. And basically the way to think about it is, if you're betting on a football match, whatever prices you've come up with will typically be the prices, when they reoppose. There's not going to be any change. However, if you're betting on a horse race, everyone kits to this opinion that Betfair, at the off is the correct price. That's not true. That is just probably the closest to what it should be with the information known before the race starts. If there's a 2-year-old maiden and a horse wins by 4 lengths and it's 6 to 4 on the machine when it goes off, that's not its true price, because when they do that exact race over again, that horse isn't going to be 6 to 4, and if it's 6 to 4 you'd have the lot on. So you're frequently going to be wrong. You have a bet on a 12 to 1 shot that you think could be 8s. If you back a 14 to 1 shot that goes off 7s, typically, and it loses, typically people will be like, got the value, that was the right bet. Most of the time that's just total nonsense. You can back loads of horses that do that. Imagine betting on a horse that ran against Frankel on debut. It doesn't matter what price you took, that was a bad bet. Even if it was 100s that went off 10s, its price was never 10s. So that I think people get lulled into thinking that Betfair's the right price, and it's not. So you need to be careful with outsiders. You'll typically get drawn into having a bet on a horse that, even if you're betting and thinking it's a 20 to 1 shot, realistically there's a lot of horses that actually have no chance when a horse lines up unless everything falls over.